Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. The spiritual masters from East and West traditions have known for centuries a truth that most of us typically overlook. We each possess a built-in mechanism for spiritual awakening. It's the sound of our own voice. According to tonight's guest, find your true voice and your life will change in ways you never imagined possible. Chloe Goodchild is a singing philosopher, vocalist, teacher, author, and founder of The Naked Voice, a pioneering experiential vocal training program that empowers people to transform their lives by finding and embodying their authentic voice. Chloe Goodchild joins me tonight to explain why and how our naked voice is our most untapped human resource, and how awakening through sound can help us break through our vocal limitations, access latent insight and intuition, and bring the gift of our true self to everyone around us. Chloe Goodchild, welcome.
Hello, it's great to be here with you, Sandie.
Good to have you here. And what I, just said about what you do is not even the half of it, as we will discover a little bit later. Chloe, you've sung for the Dalai Lama at peace conferences. You were music director, composer and performer at the Vagina Monologues with Eve Ensler in New York, where you conducted the Vulva Choir, which comprised 75 of the top actresses of the world, including Queen Latifah, Jane Fonda, Brooke Shields and Glenn Close. You recorded with Rumi poet Coleman Barks, film director Jane Campion, the Discovery Channel, the BBC, and with leading world jazz and pop musicians. And all of that and more was catalysed by a period of deafness when you were just 4 years old. So tell us about the birth of your love affair with sound and with silence.
Well, it gives me immense joy always to share my love of sound. I think my mother tells me that I came into this life laughing, which I remember as a child thinking that was a really embarrassing thing to hear your mother say. But I have been pursued by a state of joy all my life, despite all the huge ups and downs of being a rather unorthodox, nomadic mystic on this planet. And so I think my love of sound really did begin with that experience of deafness following traumatic surgery on my ears when I was 4. My mother came into my bedroom after the surgery. I'd been brought home. She came into my room. I was asleep and there was blood all over the pillow. And so I was rushed back into hospital. And the impact of that closed down my capacity to hear for about 3 years. And I think that really was my wounded healer story, if you like. It was the beginning of that narrative, at least. And it really opened for me when the hearing slowly but surely returned. It really opened the floodgates into choral music and world music and this absolute passion for polyphonic sound. So I loved, I was brought up as a teenager and just completely immersed myself in choral music. It was as if choral sound was a kind of bridge and a refuge and a way of navigating my way into everyday speak and social life, which was quite startling in the early stages. and generated, I would say, quite a degree of introversion and shyness. But there was always, when I was able to join a choral community, I was immediately sort of lifted into a world that was just a revelation, and I didn't need to stand out. I was just like integrated in this sort of unified field of awareness. And it was just heaven. It was heaven. It was like being in the presence of silence when I was in this partial deafness. I would say it gave me access to the music of nature, which was essentially, the sound of the wind. I could hear that. I could feel that against my ears. It was the look in the eye of a bird, a songbird, just in the thicket of the garden where I lived as a child. And the fascination with this silence, really, and the kind of alchemy between silence as the fundamental ground of sound, silence and sound as the ground of consciousness, was really what catapulted me into kind of world travels to really explore sounds beyond my Western sacred musical upbringing. So that's how it all started, yeah.
You did study music, English and education at Cambridge. You graduated with an honours degree. You taught music for a while. And then, as you said, you went travelled extensively and, all over the world. And you studied with indigenous wisdom teachers and classical Indian musicians and masters of non-duality. And you had an incredible experience with sound. So tell us about that.
Well, I think it is what I was probably, I was regarded, I think, as quite a precocious child in that there was something about this experience of silence as a child that really affected my relationship with social communication and had me really asking myself, and particularly at school, for example, I remember asking my teachers, why am I being taught everything but what I really want to know? I want to know, who am I? What am I doing here? Why did I come here? And none of this was on the school curriculum, and it was really only music was where that I could really sort of relax into a kind of love affair with what I can only call presence, really, an experience of being. And I found it in the presence of my grandmother. I found it in intimate love affairs, with wonderful teenage love affairs. I had a wonderful boyfriend called Harry Williamson who had a catamaran and a motorbike, and he was 16 and I was 13, and there was this fantastic sort of connection that he had with music and with adventure and with going beyond the boundaries of the confines of ordinary social conditioned life. And obviously for me that was pretty reined in. My dear dad was a bishop, in fact, an Episcopal bishop, and my mother was much younger than him. And so the whole kind of relationship between spirituality and sexuality was really not addressed within my Christian upbringing. It was a Protestant upbringing. And so I found myself constantly in this kind of restlessness, and that I suppose had been really catalyzed by those early, quite traumatic early childhood experiences, but then really gave birth to a fascination with sound and with listening and with self-inquiry that was, I found access, a deeper understanding of this when I found myself in East Africa in voluntary service. I was out there exploring what happens when, different tribal communities come together and grow up together, and how does that affect their languages and the way they communicate with each other. So I was very blessed to, really access a whole range of world music in Africa and in Turkey and Greece, and then in a non-violent mystical community, de l'Arche, in the south of France, where I found myself sitting with a remarkable man called Lanza del Vasto and his wife, Chanterelle, who was an incredible violinist. And the two of them had come together, and he had been with Mahatma Gandhi, in India. And it was really he who showed me that there is this kind of miraculous power that can be unleashed when you bring together music with an understanding of nonviolence and nonviolent, unconditional love, loving presence. And so that was an extraordinary experience. They created their own mystical music. And at the same time, there they were in the south of France, protecting the well-being of shepherds that were being thrown out of their farms in order to make space for the military to expand their horizons in that part of France. And so that, combined with my fascination with the lives of people like Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, and Mahatma Gandhi, and so on, really, and very much inspired by the use of silence in Quaker meetings. So I moved from the Protestant Christian church into the field of listening that you find where a group of people sit together for an hour in silence, and that you only stand and minister, what they call ministering, if you're moved by the Spirit to do so. And it was in the Quaker meetings, actually, that I discovered the connection between silence and the natural outpouring of the human spirit, how it can just, the voice can just express itself, even non-verbally, out of silence. So that was really the beginning of starting to explore a whole new language of communication that was inspired very much by this interconnection between silence, deep, loving presence that is found in... Yeah.
Sorry, you had an experience in India that you experienced what you term your own naked voice as your true self. And that experience ultimately gave birth to the unique method of sound and voice that you termed the naked voice, which is the title of your book, it's the title of your program, it's considered your international brand now.
Yeah, I mean, it really was the connection with the spiritual philosophy of India and their very unique and ancient understanding of sound and the spiritual purpose of sound, and particularly vocal sound, as the expression of the human, the most intimate way that a human being can express spirit. And I was involved in the 80s and 90s with a project called the Open Gate, and we used to bring teachers from America to England, the likes of Ramdas and James Hillman, Marion Woodman, Robert Bly, Gabriel Roth, these kind of new paradigm teachers. And it was Ramdas who really opened my ears to the whole way of devotional chant. He would use this wonderful Hindu-inspired devotional chanting at the beginning of all his talks and so on. And Ramdas, being this incredible sort of folk hero of America, psychology professor, who then found his voice in India, and became this incredible spokesman for Indian philosophy. It was really him that opened the door. And my connection with him connected me with the great luminary, one of the greatest woman saints and seers of 20th century India, Anandamayi Ma. And it was the dreams that I'd been having of this Indian woman who would run towards me and gather me up in her skirts and swallow me whole and spew me out as a man and a woman. They were very, very traumatic dreams. But it wasn't until I was involved in organizing a conference and a retreat that Ramdas was organizing, that Ramdas was wanting to give in France. And he said one night, I want to give a slideshow of the greatest saints of the 20th century. And amongst those great visionaries was this image of Anandamayi Ma. And once I saw that, saw her, I realized that is who I'd been dreaming of. And life was never the same again. And
okay, I'm going to hold you there, Chloe. We'll have a little cliffhanger because we have to go to break. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is voice pioneer, author, sound visionary, international singer, performer and recording artist, and founder of The Naked Voice, Chloe Goodchild. And we're talking about her book and her training program. We'll be back with more from Chloe Goodchild after the break.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes' flagship radio show, What Is Going On. As a long-time editor, book judge, spiritual magazine publisher and radio host, I've read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors and teachers, so I know what's worth reading and what isn't. Now, with the spiritual book market growing increasingly crowded, more and more people are seeking my help in finding the authentic voices, the empowering tools, and the genuine skip the BS guidance that will make the most difference to their spiritual development. So I decided to make it easier by bringing my knowledge, experience, and considerable network of contacts together in the No BS Spiritual Book Club. There are no ads, no joining fees, no obligations, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library compiled by recognisable and respected names of the 10 best books that help them the most on their journeys. Plus, free book excerpts, audios, and live video interviews where you can quiz them about their spiritual journeys and their 10 best list choices. Your time and money are valuable, your spiritual journey even more so. If you're looking for genuine guidance from people who have walked this path before you, check out Sedgbeer.com. Click on the No BS Spiritual Book Club tab and join the club. That's Sedgbeer.com, SEDGBEER.com. I'll see you there.
These are the sounds of a dinner that almost didn't happen. A dinner now served, thanks to people like you. Due to COVID-19, 17 million more Americans may face hunger. Feeding America is helping our neighbors in need. And if you're able, you can too. Donations are being accepted at feedingamerica.org/coronavirus. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Welcome back. Chloe Goodchild, I can tell from the first segment that you're one of those rare guests that I just want to do a whole series of interviews with because your life is so rich with the experiences. Unfortunately, we only have a certain amount of time tonight. So I want to hear a little bit more about Ram Dass. I want to hear about everything, but we are going to have to condense it down because we also want to play some of your music. So we left it on a cliffhanger. Tell us what happened with Ram Dass.
Well, basically what happened was that really opened the door into a whole new chapter of my life, really exploring the nature of non-duality, the language of oneness. And that brought me, following Ram Dass's request, to find this man who at that time was called the Inner Guru. And he was later known as Papaji. He was a very remarkable transmission master of non-duality, and it was really my visit. We found him for Ram Dass, but we also had the extraordinary privilege, life-changing privilege, to spend 6 days with him. And it was during those 6 days that my ordinary mind completely disappeared. My identification with Chloe, who Chloe was, my my whole kind of secure sense of self and identity disappeared, and that left me in a state of deep bliss and presence, and that really altered the whole course of my life and my relationship with my work with the human voice, because it became clear that the voice was to be a spiritual practice and a catalyst for self-inquiry, of fundamentally focusing on the question, who am I? And so that's become the sort of central question of my work, and being a musician, that really gave birth to the naked voice. Suddenly I was able to hear voices and to hear human beings, to hear this all-pervading, unchanging sound that existed in absolutely everything. So whatever voices I was listening to, I could hear that people were identified with their social personality, socially conditioned voices. And so there was a lot of, identified with separateness and suffering, basically. And I became absolutely fascinated by how we have created that condition for ourselves. And so devoted myself to creating a vocal practice and a vocal methodology, if you like, that gives people a context within which they can go very deep into a self-inquiry process, for which the voice is the central kind of conduit and compass and ground. And so, for many of us, the voice, when you ask somebody, how do you feel about your voice? Most people will say, I haven't got one, or, let me tell you about the terrible things about my voice, how I was told to shut up and all of this. And it's very interesting now, in this time, where we're actually literally being, as a society, are having to mask our mouths from the kind of toxicity of the consciousness that we're all having to navigate at the moment in the name of COVID. But to come back to the whole question of who am I and who is singing, I decided, okay, I'm a musician, so I'm going to see if I can develop a kind of musical framework around the non-dual, this ancient wisdom teachings of non-duality that translate themselves into a kind of more of a musical experience where people can start to really experience that unchanging note that exists within their ordinary, everyday, social chatting voice. And if they can dare themselves to go deep down beneath that and start listening without judging to who is actually communicating and who am I in here, who's actually in here. And the voice is the most extraordinary friend in that regard. It's the most intimate friend we'll probably ever have as human beings. And it's just miraculous. I feel so incredibly privileged to have been able to work with thousands of individuals, really exploring the how you can come to an embodiment of your true nature, for example, through this practice of listening to oneself without judging. And then, of course, making the connection between speaking and singing, for example. You know, we've made singing this kind of elitist activity for which, a minority of individuals are trained, and then the rest of us has to go along and pay money to listen to them. And that's why I found myself forever returning to more coherent communities where singing and music are still an integral part of everyday language. So bringing those indigenous experiences back into my own Western environment has sometimes been very challenging, but also incredibly rewarding.
So how would I find my authentic voice? What do I need to do?
Well, there's a question. The first thing I would encourage you to do is to just listen to the sound of your name, and to listen to the sound of your name from the center of your chest. So if I was to ask you, what is your name? And then, what would you say?
Sandie.
Okay, so there is the music right there. Sandie. And if we had more time, we would start to just really stay with that. And we would find that Sandie, exactly as you said it right there, has a pitch, it has a musical tone, it has a melody, and the more deeply one starts to investigate that, you start shifting your attention from the left side of the brain to the right side of the brain, and then the whole thing joins up. And you realize there's no separation, in fact, between what we call speaking and what we call singing. What starts to happen is that we shift our attention from the mental, very often highly critical way of listening to ourselves, and we shift more from that kind of egoic personality identity into a more soulful, heartfelt relationship with that same sound, Sandie. And we bring more of a soulful quality to that, and we start asking ourselves, who is this one? Sandie. So if you actually start to exaggerate that, Sandie, you you can start to hear that within that speaking, there is an utterance that is behind the name. Ah. Ah. And how does that come across to you? How does that feel to hear?
Well, listening to you say it, I begin to hear the music there. I can hear, the beginnings of a melody there, a note.
Yes. And sometimes what happens, I wonder if that happened, did you find yourself sort of describing it in some way, or defining it, or analysing it, or interpreting it, or...
No, I didn't. What I noticed the last time you said, you were saying almost like an R sound, I was waiting for you to start singing because that's where it felt it was going.
Well, I was following you, actually, because it was your voice. And it had a beautiful kind of microtonal lilt to it that just sort of was sliding down a little bit. And the more that you hear that, it's like it's almost like your voice itself is inviting you to relax. That's what I was hearing. To just to allow yourself to slide. Like you might slide into a sofa, or and just let go. And the voice can give us so much advice without even, being complicated about it. And, of course, what that does is it brings you into the body. And many of us, the human voice, particularly in our Western culture, is up in the head, in the mental thinking mind. And so just to drop down into the center of the chest, and then to drop down into the solar plexus, and then to join, the hara, the energy of the belly, the fire in the belly, and to join that with the devotional heart, and to join that with the insightful pineal gland in the center of the head. When you join those three brains up, you then have one hell of a human utterance, and that utterance becomes the most extraordinary teacher. But then, of course, what really excites me is to invite you, for example, to say your name, but then to listen to the quality of silence your voice leaves behind. And that's not something that we are taught in vocal.
No, it isn't. And it is something I would love to do with you. We don't have time to do it tonight because this is such a fascinating and complex topic, and it's such a rich, your whole life experience, all of it, your work, is such a rich source of important information for awakening. It's impossible to do it justice in just a few minutes here. So we're going to have to skate over some of this, which makes me very sad. But unfortunately, that's what we have to do, because I really do want to get to an experience that you had. I want to play us out of this segment with one of your songs. And there is a story behind that song. So if you could briefly tell us what happened to you on September the 11th, 2001, when you were flying from the UK over New York en route to San Francisco.
Well, there I was in this United Airlines flight. I was flying from the UK to San Francisco to pick up a portable keyboard that I'd left there, and I was on my way to Canada to teach a retreat up in Canada, in British Columbia. And we're flying over New York City at about 10:30. In fact, it's 10:30. We were actually flying over New York City around 9:30, but they waited till about 10:30 till we cleared the space. And suddenly we hear the pilot going, "Ladies and gentlemen, grave news." And we all go, "Oh my God, we're going to crash land. What's happening?" And then the news comes out. He's completely inarticulate. He's just stumbling through his words, and we just hear World Trade Towers, and then he tells us the story, and the entire airplane becomes like one of our vocal workshops. Suddenly everybody's let their hair down and everybody's communicating with everybody. And I just get this, because all the American borders have been closed, so we can't land. We're just up in the air for a few more hours till they finally bring us down in Canada, where we find ourselves in queues for 2 or 3 days, trying to move on. So a message came to me out of this experience. I had this sort of vision of the whole world, and the message was, the Great Mother is going to keep killing until we wake up. And that message gave birth to my album Fierce Wisdom, which was really a dedication to the Great Mother. And so there's a lot of, it's very much inspired by my root teacher, Ananda Mai Ma, who I was referring to earlier. And many of her teachings, which are very much oriented around this idea of oneself is all there is. But this particular piece that you're going to play, the Om Tara mantra, Tara being the goddess of compassion, has been a very central archetypal presence in my life. And so I dedicated this music to her and to the evolution of compassion in the world.
Okay,
and
well,
we ended up playing this music with eternity.
We're going to play that piece of music now, and it'll take us out to the break.
Om Tara
the cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
I'm Fidel Mshombo. I was born in a city called Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America, and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Chloe Goodchild, that piece of music, Omtara, we only heard about 3 minutes of it. I think it's about 13 minutes long. There's something about that. I found myself listening to it again and again and again over the last few days since you sent it to me. It resonates on a level that I cannot even begin to understand or interpret. There are no words to say, what do I feel? What does it mean? I just don't know. I just know that I keep wanting to come back and listen to it. I know that you have trained mentors and facilitator teams in the Naked Voice trainings, courses, experiential research, etc., etc. You do so much for people who cannot have access to you or to one of your trained facilitators. You created a DVD with Sounds True called Awakening with Sound, which teaches us to engage with our own naked voice. Now, when I was reading about this, and I don't encourage everybody to, check this out, but when I was reading about it, there was one piece that caught my attention. Yes. In it, on that DVD, you talk about the 7 sounds of love, which is a practice to open our heart to the expression of love in all its forms. And I was reading one of the reviews, which just stopped me in my tracks because somebody was being so open and honest in their review. They talked about having an absolute emotional outpouring while doing this part of that DVD and sobbing while singing the 7 sounds of love that you share on it. Tell us just a little bit about, we've got 10 minutes before I want to play the, probably less than that, the last piece of music of yours before we finish. But, in a couple of minutes, can you tell us, what is that 7 sounds of love about, that it had that effect on that person?
Oh, that's so lovely. Well, it's very precious to me that it's really that particular practice which takes you through. It's a body-centered singing map, really, which takes you through the different locations of consciousness in the body, from the root to the crown and back again, with meditative movements. So you're singing, it could be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but in fact I use the Indian mantric sounds, sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa, ni, da, pa, ma, ga, ni, sa. And then what happened was when I came back from India and I was practicing my Indian singing and so on, and then introducing this to others, I met this wonderful energy movement master called Masashi Minagawa, Japanese energy movement master, and he said, why are you just sitting still singing? These sounds, if you would embody the sound more in a more impactful way, if you brought in these compassionate energy movements, which are based on sword movements of a practice called Shin Taido, which means new body way. And so these 7 sounds of love became a meditative energy movement practice, which when we introduced it to 9-year-old children, they then translated it into the root chakra, I am, the 2nd chakra, I open, the 3rd, I will, the 4th, I offer, the 5th, the throat, I share, the 6th, I serve, the 7th, the back of the head, I surrender, and then opening your arms right out into the universe, I love. And then you bring those movements as you are sounding back down into the body. And the movements themselves really do create, make you aware of the energy field that is beyond the boundaries of the skin of the body. Sometimes it's called, in the American Indian tradition, it's called the Merkaba, the the light ship. The body is actually, the physical body is just only the beginning of a much wider field of energy, which we call the singing field, actually, which goes beyond the boundaries of the skin, and it has an architecture of its own, which some people call a light ship. The Merkaba is known as that, and it's very stabilizing. But it does open up the different locations of love in the body. So from instinctual love in the belly through intuitive love in the heart center into the insightful, compassionate love in the center of the skull, the pineal gland, which opens up the third eye of compassion and insight. And so when you connect all of those, the practice connects it all up so that the ego, the soul, and the spirit become one just unchanging field of love, unconditional, loving presence.
Wow. Okay, now I understand why she was sobbing. So, Chloe, you sing, you teach, you perform, you record on your Naked Voice music label, you present, you're an author for Sounds True audiobooks and the Shift Network. Your music is available all over the place, Amazon, Spotify, Apple, etc. You are producing a new 12-module course, which starts on December the 12th on the Shift Network, which is about the expressing the music of your soul. And it's very experiential. So it's a sound and voice course. So I just want people to know about that, because they can find out more about that on thenakedvoice.com and experience you. You also have an awful lot of freebies on your website, the listening room, where people can go and sample, my goodness, lots of pieces of music. What is your favourite thing to do of all of the incredible things that you do?
Wow, that's a really lovely question. Well, I do love singing. I love sharing the love that the voice can bring into the world. That is my great love, is to be able to share that love with others, and to share it as soul friendship with so many people. I think this work has really opened a whole new door for me in terms of what's possible in human friendship, and that gives me immense joy. And more recently, it's been swimming in these turquoise waters in Crete, off the coast of Crete, and you would have no idea that there was any problem in the world whatsoever. So I've been very blessed to spend a few weeks there in recent months.
You created the Naked Voice Charitable Foundation in 2004 to disseminate a deeper awareness of the essential role that conscious communication plays in strengthening ethical awareness, social health and well-being in all realms of human life. So how are you disseminating that information, that awareness? What methods are you using?
Well, it's when I started working in prisons that I realized we were going to need a charitable organization. But my main interest really is to make the work that I'm doing, which has been very much a self-employed business for many, many years, to make it accessible to as many people as possible. Basically, that's is really our aim with the charity. And that's still in its very early days, actually. So that's quite a new direction, but we're very much looking forward to just making this work accessible in places that, you never would imagine possible. Certainly the work that I've been lucky enough to do in prisons, for example, and also working in mental health is another area. There's the most wonderful organization that I collaborate with called the Compassionate Mental Health, which is inevitably becoming more and more critical right now. And where it's the most phenomenal, radical organization where you show up at gatherings and you have no idea, who has been stigmatized with some kind of label, whether it's psychiatrist or doctor or nurse or social worker, or I'm called a soul doctor, or schizophrenic, or, you have no idea who anybody is. They're the most incredible gatherings where human beings can connect in a spirit of love and connectedness and collaboration and cooperation and compassion.
Wow. Can I just interrupt you there, Chloe, because we are getting very close to the end of the show, and I do not want to miss the last piece of music from your album, Fierce Wisdom, that we are going to play. And this is your world anthem called Singing Field, which you performed at an event called Transforming September the 11th at the Royal Opera House in London in the presence of world leaders and UN members. So we're going to play that now, and I'm hoping that we may have just a little bit of time left just to say goodbye at the end of it.
Beyond ideas of right and wrongdoing, there is a field, a singing field. I'll meet you there. Beyond ideas of right and wrongdoing, there is a field, a singing field. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you
Wow, what is the singing field, Chloe? We've probably got less than a minute for you to tell us.
Well, it's a metaphor for a cooperative, collaborative, compassionate community of living individuals, and may that be realized on this planet before too long.
Well, I'm certainly willing to meet you there, for sure. Chloe Goodchild, thank you so much. I wish we had more time. You're going to have to come back so we can talk some more. Been absolutely fascinating. And if you want to know more, go to thenakedvoice.com and chloegoodchild.com, and you will find all sorts of wonderful delights to dive into. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. You can learn more about me and the No BS Spiritual Book Club at sedgbeer.com. In the meantime, I'll be back with another edition of What Is Going On at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me.
Thank you.